back to the Carbon Cardboard Podcast episode. I'm not sure, but we're here back again. I'm your host, Bryan, Q3 Cards,
I think it's
joined as always
five.
with five. No, it's more than five.
You think? Maybe six?
Six or
Six
seven.
max.
We'll go with, we'll call it seven. I think it is seven. Well,
All
double
right.
07.
All right.
Anyways, so yeah, this is live. I'm your host, Bryan, Q3 Cards, joined as always with my good friend, Scott at the F1 Castle. And wow, what a race. We're going to talk Japan, and Japan was moved up in the calendar, so we had the cherry blossoms.
That's right.
It was awesome. This is just one of those tracks, and we mentioned it in our last episode. It's just a pure old school, like technical track. We saw it with who ended up winning. Obviously, Max, spoiler alert. So we're
Yeah.
gonna talk Japan. We're gonna briefly, I'm gonna pepper you with some questions. We're a couple races in, four races in, and let's start looking at the pecking order. And obviously, things could change as the season goes on and upgrades and stuff happen. You just opened a 2020 Topps Chrome Formula One case that was
It's decent. It was
it was
as
it was
F1 Ben would
pretty
say, it was decent.
it was epic. So we're gonna talk about some of the
Decent.
hits. All right, we'll go with decent. And we're gonna wrap up the show with. I feel like we've talked about this a little bit, and
You teased it.
we teased it. That's
Teased
a
it.
good thing. Um, Something that Fanatics Live has been doing is the 10. So they obviously all sports and everything that gets broken on their platform, like the 10 cards that like people are going for, and we've talked about it before, Scott, like breaking. I think there's a little bit of a misnomer about breaking, but like for the most part, like that's how you can get some of these big cards, and we're here to celebrate when, especially when it's a Formula One card that gets hit, because
Oh yeah.
it was what the Max Superfractor was temporarily on the list.
Max Superfractor was on there. They ended up taking it off actually before it got hit. And I think like, from their perspective, they're kind of using it like, hey, when new products come out, they're gonna put like the biggest hits from that product on the 10. So, Chrome came out, Max was on there for, almost a month. I don't think quite a month. Didn't get hit, and they took it off, put on, some messy card, and now, there's been a bunch of cards that have gone off and on from that list. The Max has been hit anyways. It wasn't hit on their platform though; it was hit on Instagram by a new breaker, which is really cool. But yeah, so there's no F1 cards on the 10. So yeah, later in the show we'll go over what we cooked up in the F1 castle for
And it is pretty epic. I keep using that term epic. It's late here on the East Coast.
you.
A little too late. You're drinking coffee. I
It's
just
true.
got I just got my water bottle here. So, anyways, Scott, Japan. Obviously, it happened in the dead of the night here on the East Coast.
Oh yeah,
It's one of those races that in Europe, like they have to do what we typically do on a Sunday morning is you
super
wake
early.
up and 8 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Eastern, the race starts. They wake up at 7 a.m., GMT or whatever it is,
Yeah.
their time zone, and then they're getting the experience that we typically do for race weekends.
It's true. Yeah, it's kind of like what the West Coast usually deals with, because like we think it's early for us on the East Coast for most of the European races at 9 a.m. I mean, West Coast that's 6 a.m. So I mean, it's tough out there on the West Coast. Props to all you West Coast fans, because I know a lot of the races are really early for you. But yeah, so it was early in Europe. It was late for us here, 1 a.m. start. And there was a delay after a first lap crash between Daniel Ricciardo and Alexander Albon, two fan favorites. Oh my gosh, turn 3 crashed, both went into the wall, red flag, and we had like a 20-minute delay. And I feel like the Japanese Grand Prix is cursed in some way, that like there's always some type of delay or something going on with it. But yeah, so after the 20-minute delay though, it was smooth sailing. And it was a really interesting race. I think, you know, in this modern era of Formula One, it's not super easy to follow. You know, go back to 2022 with the new regulations, and we were seeing, overtakes over and over and over. As we've moved it further into these regulation, teams have learned how to, create some of that outwash on the back of their car, and it's not as easy to follow anymore. So we don't see as many just pure overtakes. They're usually like DRS on the straights. The way that you get pure overtakes in this era of Formula One is by different tire strategies. And that's what we saw in Suzuka. We saw different tire compounds, we saw different tire stint lengths, and it created an offset of whether your tires were new or old, or whether they were hard, medium, or soft, difference variance across the tires. And that was what created some electric racing. I mean, Yuki Tsunoda, who, by the way, Castle call that he would get points, and he snuck in at 10th. So we're two in a row on the Castle call, but he had two separate passes through the S's in Suzuka, which were legendary on the outside of the initial S coming in. I mean, oh my gosh, it was awesome, and it was really cool to see Yuki being the one pulling it off. So yeah, some really good strategy racing. Ferrari with,
Yeah, tell me about Leclerc, because
I
how did
mean,
he
so
like?
Leclerc, if you look at qualifying, if you just go look at the qualifying sheet, you're like, oh my God, Leclerc in eighth. What happened to him? He's supposed to be like the maestro for qualifying. Like, how did he do so bad? Well, how he did so bad is he made one tiny mistake. He was a tenth away from the front row. So that's how close everyone is in qualifying right now. Like from 2 to 8 was a difference of a tenth. And like Max was barely ahead of Perez as well. So like qualifying was super close. So Leclerc had just a little snap in the middle of his qualifying run. He ends up down in eighth. So Ferrari is like, listen, we're going to do something crazy. We're going to do something different to everybody. He extends extremely long on his medium tires. The medium tires were supposed to go, around like 18, 20 or so laps. He goes well past that to create an extremely large offset. And he was one of the only drivers to do a one stop, right? So he extends with the mediums, switches to the hards, does a one stop. So he saves all the time on having to pit, ends up moving all the way up from eighth, finishes what was, I believe, was fourth at
Fourth,
the end of
yeah,
the
just
day,
off the
fourth,
podium.
right? So from eighth to fourth, I mean, and the way that was done was, obviously brilliant tire management by Leclerc. And if you think back to his time in like 2019, where he was qualifying well ahead of Vettel, but then Vettel was beating him in the race, especially in the first half of the year, because Leclerc was not great on his tires. He's come a long way in terms of his ability to manage his tires. And he did a great job. He did a great job there. So Leclerc, I mean, well-deserved driver of the day, drove a fantastic race for his strategy, and, qualified eighth, but finished fourth. So really good job by Leclerc. And, Ferrari, man, they're firing on all cylinders right now, because Sainz also, did a little bit of a different strategy. He still had a two stopper, but medium, hard, and he had a little bit of a tire offset, and he came through past Lando, past Leclerc, and there he is on the podium again, Carlos Sainz. I mean, ever since he got that appendix taken out, you can't keep him off the podium.
We joked about this before, but I just I really wonder. Obviously, he's motivated right now. He's extremely underrated. He's a very skilled driver. He's definitely not a number two driver by any means, although he's treated like that by his current team, and now they're replacing him with one of the legends of the sport, with Lewis
Yeah,
Hamilton. I mean, if I'm Ferrari and I'm Fred Vasseur and I seeing the results, and obviously Hamilton's in a bad car right now. I mean, obviously I got my Mercedes
bad.
shirt on. I'm a fan of all teams, just like you are. Man, I just wonder if they would have waited a little bit longer. Like maybe Signs would have been just re-signed. I don't. It's
I,
tough.
it is tough, but here's the thing: if you put yourself in Fred Vasseur's shoes, if the opportunity to sign Lewis Hamilton comes across your desk, you can't. You can't pass. You cannot pass. You can't pass. And they look at Leclerc and Signs going into the season, and of course they're going to pick Leclerc because he has been kind of their golden boy. Signs was the stopgap, the replacement, So I don't blame them for what they did, and I almost kind of don't even necessarily look at it like, oh, Signs was kicked to the curb for Lewis. It's just like you can't not sign Lewis.
Hmm.
Like if Lewis comes to you and is like, "Hey, I want to drive for your team," you make it happen. Because it's more than just the on track, for Lewis Hamilton to be on your team. It is everything else,
He's an
It's
icon.
Ferrari's stock price, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just unfortunate for Sainz, really, at the end of the day. It's just unfortunate. And I know you're talking about how he's underrated. And I think he used to be underrated. But I think now everyone is starting to rate him. I think people are really catching on to the fact like, "Oh wow,
He's
he's
good.
he's good. He's consistent. He's finally got the car underneath him. He has confidence in the car. He is really good. And God,
He kind of has like Alonso, obviously being from obviously from Spain as
from
well.
Spain. Yeah.
Alonso got to the point and still is to this day, even at in his 40s. Not only are they driving, but they're also doing the technical side of things, um, the extra strategy, and obviously
Mm.
Ferrari's
The
strategy has been far
DRS.
better. Yeah, just doing things that are showing that he's at an advanced part right now, at an advanced stage of his career, and I think he's still got some really good years ahead of him. He just needs to make sure he's in a good car. Like, don't go to the
Yep.
back of the field, Carlos. There's
I
don't.
know. Well, and that's my worry because I think before this year, and or just when it was announced that Lewis was going and signs out of a job, people were linking him to like well maybe Mercedes, right? Because now the seat's open there. But outside of that, it's like okay, well Audi's coming in 2026, so maybe he goes to stake F1 and then is with Audi and he can be their like lead driver and that's great. But now, God, I mean, I feel like if he goes there, that's such a letdown because if he
Hmm.
goes to stake F1 next year, throw it away. Throw away 2025. Like they're going to be a back of the field team next year, right? They're back of the field right now. They're going to be back of the field next year and his talent will be wasted. And then when Audi comes in, it's not like they're going to come in and immediately be a top 2 or 3 team. They're going to need some time to get in. So I feel like he's gonna, if he goes that route, it's like 1, 2, maybe 3 years where he's in his prime right now. I mean, what I really hope, I hope he either goes to Mercedes because I do believe in Mercedes over the next 2 to 3 years. I really do. So I hope he either goes to Mercedes or maybe Alonso leaves Aston Martin, he goes there because I think they're still potentially a really good candidate. When we move forward into the new era, or what I'd really love to see is if for whatever reason Perez or Max leave Red Bull. Oh, dude, I would love to see him in a Red Bull. So I hope he goes to one of those 3 teams, but we'll have to see. We won't know until at least summer. At least summer. I don't think we'll hear anything.
It's fun to play the speculation game.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, let's speculate a little bit on the pecking order of the 10 Formula
Okay.
One teams. And you are, for a lack of a better term, the expert of the two of us. I'm here, I'm the point guard. I'm here to facilitate the show. You actually have a lot of the technical knowledge and have been a Formula One fan for far many more years than I have because I just started in 2021.
Nothing
Let's
wrong
go
with
through.
that though.
No, there is nothing wrong with it. We love new fans, and there's new fans entering all the time. Either whether Drive to Survive or finding the cards in the hobby. Actually, I started with the cards and
There you
led
go.
into everything else. So let's. go worst to first.
Worst to first. Okay.
Worst to first. And who do you feel like at this point, and maybe even over the next couple races, and it's hard because some of the bottom teams don't have a point yet. So it's what, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 don't have a point yet. Or
Yeah,
so.
I mean the thing is though is I try not to just focus on, because I mean you could go down the list, 1 through 10 and be like, oh well, here's what their points are, so this is their ranking, and I really try not to look at that, and I look at like, hey, here's their current performance and like maybe where I see them going over the next couple of races. So I think solidly in last, like honestly, and it's not even just necessarily the pace of their car, but also just the team, their pit stops, their strategies is it's Kick, Sauber, Stake F1. Like they're last because not like their car is slow. Okay. Their car is slow. Botas maybe makes out a Q3 a couple times this season, but their pace is really slow. And then, put them in a pit stop. I mean, we saw there was a pit stop war where 5 teams they were all following each other. Botas was in second in this gaggle of 5 cars. He comes out in last because, having a 1 second or 2 second slower pit stop, if you're just doing it by yourself and then going out, isn't the end of the world. But if you're all going into the pits at the same time and your pit stop is 2 seconds slower, you're screwed. You're screwed.
Mm,
And that's what happened. So I put them solidly in last place. And then I think ninth is close for me. I think it's Alpine right
mm-hmm.
now.
Agree.
Everyone talking about the tractor. I'd say it's Alpine. I do think they are going to continue to progress though. Like I actually think that they're going to move forward in the pecking order a little more as they start adding upgrades. But right now I definitely would put them in ninth. I mean, they're the only team I really think that is contending with Stake F1 for the last spot. And then, and this goes against what the points say right now, but I actually put Haas in eighth. I put Haas in eighth. I think when they scored points, it was extremely, advantageous, right? There was the
Fluky.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was the time where, Kevin Magnussen backed up the pack, almost took out Albon and doing all this stuff, call it dirty driver and call it team player, whatever you want. But he, basically got Nico those points. And then the time that they both scored was a little bit fluky as well, where there were a lot of DNFs ahead of them. So I kind of give it to them. I put Williams just ahead of them, but man, I put Williams ahead of them based on pace, but I am terrified for Williams because they are one crash away from like maybe having to sit out a Grand Prix. I mean, all of the changes that they've made to the calendar to make it more efficient, meanwhile, you've got Williams sending their car back to the UK in between every race because they've, blasted it to smithereens. So, I'm really praying for them that they get their act together and stop putting it in the wall. Like, please, for the love of God, just stop putting it in the wall.
I mean, you've seen the memes about like the Green Mile, and it's like the
Oh,
Williams
I'm
mechanics are
tired.
like, I'm tired, boss.
Yeah.
And actually, I did want to mention one thing too about Alpine, and you might know this a little bit better, but I thought I saw a stat that Alpine has been already overtaken the most times on track, and actually Gasly has been overtaken like what, like 16, 17 times in 4 races.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, you gotta, a little caveat with that is that some of that is like when you pit, when you don't pit, right? Because, some of these guys have been like overtaken by like Max
Mm.
because like he's pit before them or something and then passes them. So like there's some things like that. But yeah, I mean, Alpine, they definitely have been passed a lot. But, I think Sauber would be right up there with them, except Sauber's always starting at the back. So it's hard to get past. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, Alpine, they're definitely in trouble. But so I
So
put
six,
Williams seventh, yeah.
yeah,
So
he's sixth.
sixth, and I think sixth, this is like solidly like they are on their own in sixth is V Carb, right? Visa Cash App RB. I think they are like pace wise, they're well ahead of Williams and the rest of the teams, but they're also like they're behind, the Aston Mercedes and everyone else, right? So they're kind of like stuck right in that sixth place. And points wise, they're in sixth, but I think that, they're actually much further ahead of the teams behind than the points really lead on. It's just tough to get points right now because the top five teams they're just faster, right? So like everything else equal, like, if those 10 drivers are finishing, they're generally all going to be in the points. So it's tough to pick up points. But I think RB definitely in sixth place. Now, in fifth, I'm actually going to go with Mercedes.
Hmm.
And so if you look at the constructors' standings, it's Aston Martin. But I think that if we're talking just like, listen, the car itself, the pace of the car, I'm going to say Mercedes. I mean, Alonso is consistently qualifying ahead of one, if not both of their Mercedes, and he's finishing ahead of one, if not both of the Mercedes on track, right? I mean, I think it gets really close. So there's been a lot of close calls, and sometimes, he's been like splitting the Mercedes. But there's been races where he's ahead of both of them. And I think in qualifying, I mean, he's more often than not been ahead of both, right? So I think in Alonso's hands, the Aston Martin is in fourth. In Stroll's hands, the Aston Martin, I mean, they might be seventh. But so that's kind of the the issue for Aston Martin right now is that Stroll just not getting it done because according to him, like they're in a whole nother category.
Oh
Like,
my gosh, that
that
was like
that
his voice
radio.
cracking.
Oh my god.
He will hear that often. I hope it makes it to Drive to
Oh,
Survive.
it will. That radio, man, I've heard it like 50 times on like different memes and everybody just making fun of like it was so bad. It reminds me of like a little kid playing video games or something and like just like whining. It
Like
was it
losing at
was, it was
Mario Kart too,
yeah, it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad by Stroll.
Uh,
But so
the
so,
one
so
thing
then
too is,
oh god.
well, one other thing, Scott, about the Aston Martin is at what point does Lawrence Stroll decide that he needs another driver with Alonso? Is it maybe Sainz is that guy? Like
Maybe.
it's tough. I would imagine if I was in his position, it would be really tough to can my son if that was that. But if he's serious about building a world champion, you can't tell me that he thinks that his son is a world championship contender,
Yeah, I mean, I
given
think
what Alonso is able to do to that car.
he's had enough evidence that's contrary to the belief that his son can win a world championship now. I think at this point, right? So, I mean, I saw something that was pretty funny because there's some footage of Lance Stroll. He was hanging out with I think it was the Canadians
Montreal
hockey
Canadiens, yeah.
team. Yes, Montreal Canadiens, and he was like, he had the whole get up on their uniforms, skating around, and like someone took that clip and they're like, oh, like this just in the offseason, like Lawrence Stroll buys the Montreal Canadiens and like Lance Stroll retires from F1 and like becomes a professional hockey player. And like really it's just like he just does it so he can get him out of the seat and like put someone else in. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know if Lance is just going to throw in the towel or what, but yeah, he's not getting it done. But yeah, so that's Mercedes fifth, Aston fourth,
Fourth.
and then I think Suzuka for me cemented the next two, right? Because I think based on the type of track layout and what we saw last year from McLaren, we were thinking, hey, McLaren should be second fastest here, and they weren't. They weren't. Ferrari was second fastest, and I think Ferrari has kind of proven it now on enough different types of tracks that McLaren is kind of solidly in third. This is another one where like McLaren is like solidly above, I think, like Aston Mercedes, right? I think they're enough ahead of them that it's like a pretty clear cut third. But then at the same page, like Ferrari is enough ahead of McLaren where it's like they're obviously second. And this year Ferrari's not making the strategy blunders that they've made in the past. So I would solidly put, Ferrari in second, McLaren in third, and then obviously, Red Bull on any given weekend is going to be the best team, right? I think we're going to see some tracks, maybe if they favor Ferrari, maybe if we see like, some hardcore graining on the tires, some colder temperatures, things like that, where the Ferrari might be able to challenge the Red Bull. Um, but I think it's pretty clear that Red Bull is the fastest car. So yeah, so real quick on that rundown from first to last, it's Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Aston Martin, Mercedes, RB, Williams, Haas, Alpine, and Stake F1 kick Sauber.
So essentially it's Aston and Williams that are kind of elevated from where they are in the current standings. So
Yes, exactly.
yeah, no, that's honestly a really solid take there, and we'll start to see it play out, and upgrades will happen,
Yeah.
and there's going to be unexpected things that happen, DNFs and car issues, and hopefully Williams doesn't have to sit out a race. I mean, that would be
Uh,
historic. I just feel bad because I am a huge James Bowles fan. I think he's well spoken. He's what this sport needs in terms of what the team principal does. Um, they've had a lot of bad luck, and
yeah.
I don't think they could have in a million years projected that they, obviously they probably knew they were taking a risk with the amount of not having a backup chassis. I mean, I mean, it is a risk when you've got one of the drivers that doesn't have a huge track record, but Albon is the one that's, playing Wreck-It Ralph here.
Yeah, no, it's bad, and I mean, you come on the heels of Albon crashing and being given Logan's car, and then Logan's like, okay, don't worry about it. Give me the repaired car. Like, I'll take good care of it. He crashes it in practice, and then you're like, oh God, here we go again. And then Albon crashes in the race, and you're like James Vows. You know what? This is the thing though, is that I believe in James Vows. I think he's been a terrific team principal. I think he's going to turn things around for Williams. I think he's, beginning the rebuild. But, how he handles this, because they have been thrown at, they talk about like, how you handle adversity. Like they're dealing with, $2.4 million worth of adversity, and we're coming up on race 5, right? This is like almost an entire year's worth of, kind of what you put in your budget for repairs, and they're doing it, and we're not even a fourth of the way through the season. So, they better act like they're driving on, ice. Really be careful, please, guys. I mean, they really need to in the next race, because they don't have that spare chassis coming until Miami. So, like, if they crash in China, I, I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be rough. Well, Scott, you know what wasn't rough was this pretty solid case that you
Decent.
just opened from 2020 Topps Chrome, the OG, the set that started it all. Well, technically Dynasty started it all, but really what drew most of us in, myself included, to Formula One was the original Topps Chrome set, not Sapphire, Topps Chrome. And just talk a little bit, Scott, about obviously we started in 2021. The product was delayed. It was supposed to come out September 2020. It was
Yeah.
delayed. We're in
Well, it was,
COVID.
COVID. Yeah.
Yeah. And what that did, for the sport, and where prices have gone, because where they were at $600 a box in March, April of 2021 is a far cry from where they are now.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because me, like, being a lifelong Formula One fan and like collecting cards as a kid, I didn't find out about them until like April, right? Until April, because some people had known about them since, like, they're supposed to come out in September. Like, people that were really into the hobby and into cards, and maybe just getting into F1 or not even knowing, and just be like, oh, what's this? They were kind of waiting for it. I didn't hear about it until April, and I was immediately like, "Oh my god, I need this." And by the time I wanted it there in April, they were 500 a box. Because when they actually first came out, it was $300 a box. You
It
can
was
go on
cheaper than
Topps. You can go on Topps website. It's 299.99. Like, it says sold out, obviously, but
I've heard stories, whether this is hearsay or not, but you could have gotten I think it was about $125 a box. So if you got a case like when it first launched.
Jeez.
And a lot of people didn't jump on it at like blowout because it kept getting delayed. And then
Right.
finally, there's people obviously that invested very heavily and are doing quite well
Oh, I'm sure.
on that. But I mean, we are where we are now.
Yeah.
It's scarce. Demand
Yeah.
is still high.
It is. Yeah, I mean, because you got to understand too. Like right now, for new products that come out, there is Dynasty, which is it's fairly high end, right? But like you're only getting one card. Like it can be
Ugh.
tough.
Helen,
So
shout out to Helen. She asked me, she's like, "You haven't really talked about how your dynasty went." I'm like, I don't want to talk about it.
yeah, no, Mike Crack will forever live on in our hearts. But yeah, so Dynasty can be really tough, and if you want to buy something high end, you got to go back to the original year. And I always equate it to like first edition Pokemon or something like that, or like PMGs for basketball. It's that early year stuff that, like we said, was kind of the regular price when it first came out, but it just balloons. And I mean, these boxes at one point they were like $3,000 a box for 2020 Chrome. Now they've come down a bit since then. If you get them loose, like on eBay, maybe 1850 or something. But if you're buying them in case form, it's usually right around like 2250 or so for a box. So for a case, that's like 27 grand, right? So they're expensive for sure. And because of that, if you run a break, the spots are expensive, right? Like right now, like Mercedes on a 2020 Chrome, like I think I ran that at 6750, $6,750, right? If I were to run Mercedes on a 2023 Chrome case, it's like $500, maybe, so like there's a vast difference there in terms of what you're talking about. But the reason for that is that, the first print of these cards in 2020, they're worth a ton, and we had what was probably the second best case I've ever opened, second only to the Max Verstappen super case. Because it's funny, it's easy to forget that Max Verstappen super case was actually loaded with a
Oh,
ton of other stuff.
it
It
was
had an
juice.
orange Perez autograph, it had a gold wave Leclerc autograph, it had a Lewis Hamilton variation. Like it had a ton of stuff in it, right? So that was like, you never see cases like that. But this was easily the second best case I've ever opened. And I've opened over 100 cases of 2020 Chrome. And for me to be, this late, technically in my breaking career, and to be opening cases that have been like the first and second best case I've ever opened. I mean, you're talking, we'll go from left to right. You can't see it on the screen if you're listening to this, on Audible or Apple Podcast, but we've got an orange 70th Kimi Räikkönen portrait, which is like a sideshow here. There's a gold 70th Danny Rick portrait, which is actually was in the pack that another card came in. Gold wave Sebastian Vettel autograph. Shout out to Helen, hit that one for her. On her first time, I think, ever taking Ferrari on a
Ferrari. She said,
2020
yeah. She just
case.
like
Yeah.
she's like, I had a feeling.
Her first time ever taking Ferrari, and she gets that and wait for more. So then Yuki Tsunoda gold autograph for J Pitt. We had my man Cathal went crazy on Williams. He hit a gold wave George Russell World on Wheels. The variation in the case was George Russell, and then he also hit a true gold portrait of George Russell. So like, that was amazing. Then again, Helen Supermax hit the true gold Ferrari logo, which is one of the most beautiful cards. Like
It's
just
stunning.
by itself, it is one of the most beautiful cards you'll ever see. A true gold. Like it is just so pure. Unbelievable card. And then the top two cards, and I think, it was in like box 4 maybe that we hit this orange Lewis Hamilton autograph. And I went nuts because this is only the second Lewis Hamilton 2020 autograph I've ever hit. The first one I hit was for Black Mesa back in May of last year, almost a year ago, during the Miami Grand Prix. And, my man Cardboard Hitters was going to be in on that and ended up not. This time, made the wise decision to take Mercedes. But not only did he take Mercedes, but he also took Red Bull. And I think that was actually the biggest card that we hit. And this was in that same pack as the gold 70th Danny Rick. And it was funny because I like did the tiny little fan. And usually when I do like the peak, I only look at the last card, right? Because that's usually where the hits are. But if you have two hits, the third card can be a hit. So I went through the first base card or whatever, and I was like, okay, pulled off the second base card, and oh my lord, a red wave out of 5 Max Verstappen portrait. Unbelievable. I mean, the two cards on the screen right now, the Lewis Hamilton orange autograph and the Max red wave portrait, they're both $30,000 plus cards. Like, and that's insane. And you think, like, listen, Mercedes and Red Bull spots are not, they're not cheap. Both of those together was like $13,000. So like you can easily hit nothing and like you're down a lot of money. You better work on selling those base portraits and the track tags to claw something back. But when you hit, you hit. And
And this
this
is why you
is
do this is exactly why you do a break.
this is why
And
you
the
do it.
people that are doing this are these are the type of cards that they're chasing. So
Yep.
I mean, amazing. Like, wow. And obviously you and I have both seen the Max Superfractor, in
Yeah.
person. And I don't know. I think the waves in Topps Chrome are extremely underrated, and the fact that you've got a red out of 5, and this is now 3 years later. This just looks
Unbelievable.
gorgeous. I'm
And
jealous.
this case came from the same place as the Superfractor case. Same place. I've got 5 more.
Ooh.
Just saying. But it's funny because some people, and shout out to Dogo Tifi on this actually. But the gold waves, right? I feel like they're called like the mini superfractor, right? The little brother to the superfractor in the 2020 set, right? Or like the poor man superfractor. Because
Except they're
obviously
really hard to get a good grade
they
because
are
of the
really
peel
hard
on
to
the
get a
back.
good grade, but they're also, I mean, they're beautiful, right? They're
Yes.
beautiful. They have that, like the true in 2020, the true golds, like they're the pure, like just clean version of the card. But the wave, like it gives you that element of like, something else to the card. And like obviously the superfractor is the epitome of that, where you've got the gold vinyl. But I really do like the gold wave. But like now, I mean, Julian's sitting here with the superfractor and the red wave. I mean, why not go pick up the orange wave and the gold wave? And then you basically have like the most pure, amazing Max portrait rainbow you could ever have. Like it's just unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, shout out to Julian. Listen, this is it's big time stuff, right? Like it's not just, oh yeah, I joined a break and I hit. Like it's big time money to join in this stuff. And so like obviously I'm hoping to hit for everybody that joins into these breaks. I mean, every break I run, I hope to hit for folks, but like especially with 2020, like the money that you're putting up, it's serious coin. So like it makes me really happy when people hit like this. So yeah, huge congratulations to cardboard hitters, Julie. I mean, that was amazing. And the second best case I've ever opened, and who knows if
Could
I'll
be a
I'll
better
open
one out
another
there.
one. There could be, but that's a tough one to beat for sure.
All right. So 2020 isn't the only thing that is getting broken in the F1
It's true.
castle and in the Formula One card hobby as well. There's plenty of other great people breaking cards also as well. And so you've taken it upon yourself,
Right.
motivated by Fanatics Live, and said Formula One, Formula One needs a top 10 as well
Yeah.
because there's some big cards out there.
Oh yeah. And like I think obviously, again, shout out to all credit to Fanatics Live, right? They came up with the idea for the 10 to put all these cards out there, and I was ecstatic. I was over the moon. I mean, I made a reel about it. It was huge news when the Max Verstappen 2023 Chrome autograph super factor was on there. It was awesome. And then, man, I was so deflated though when they took it off when it hadn't been hit yet. And I think it was in that moment where I was like, no, I'm going to do something about this, and I'm going to make my own, because again, like it's just one card out of so many big hits that are in 2023. So I figured, you know what? Let's make a list 10 cards in Chrome, 10 in Sapphire, and I'll let you play a
All
little
right, let me
clip
see if
here.
I can get our. We don't have a producer. Maybe when we get big enough here, we'll work on
Yeah,
having
there we
somebody
go.
that's behind the scenes. But let's see if I can pull this off. I'm gonna have the Max and Lewis temporarily on screen, but let's see if this works. So if you're on YouTube, you just saw the little clip, and Scott's also shared this on his Instagram page, which is
Yep.
at F1 Castle, not at the F1 Castle, like I always say, but it's implied. It just rolls off the tongue better that way.
True.
So Scott, obviously, Topps Chrome has been out for about 2 months now at this point,
Hmm.
and there's been some big cards hit,
Oh yeah.
a lot of supers, but there's still a lot to be had out there. So, just on screen, we'll just show some, mocked up cards, what they could look like. And again, the Futuro cards just look amazing. I
Oh
honestly
my
haven't
gosh.
seen, actually, no, I take that back. I have seen it turn up the lights in person. So they're actually a lot cooler in person than I thought. And then
Yeah.
obviously the F1 armor. So Scott, actually, I got to ask you, how are you doing on your chase? Because I know you've mentioned before you're trying to get all 20 cards. How's that going?
Yeah, so for F1 armor, I mean, I've been trying to every time I'm in these auction battles on eBay and I keep losing, getting sniped. Like I'll have the highest bid at 5 seconds. Wait till 5 seconds, put in the highest bid, and then someone else beats me. So I'm struggling. I have like 7 out of 20. But the thing is that part of that collection from F1 armor is as you well know, because you've actually been a big part of this, is I'm not only collecting the card, but I'm also collecting the 1-2 scale helmet that is represented on the card. So I'm at 7 helmets and 7 cards, not of the same. They're not like I don't have the pairs, but I have 7 helmets and 7 cards. So we're getting there. So we're 14 out of 40 total if you add the cards and the helmets together. But we're gonna get there. I think the one thing I'm concerned about is I don't know if every single driver made a 1-2 mini helmet. So, like, I may end up having to pay, like, an exorbitant amount to
For a
have, like,
custom or something?
Bell or Schubert or DRM, like, make me a custom version, um, which I'm not looking forward to. So, I'm hoping the majority of them have them, and if not, I mean, I'm gonna do it because I really want this set to be complete, and it would be a shame if I was missing, like, 2 helmets or something. So we'll get there. But, yeah, so it's a work in progress. It's probably gonna take a little while longer, but yeah, so this is basically 10 of the biggest cards in each set. What I wanted to try to do is spread out the drivers, right? I didn't want it to be like, okay, there's 5 Max cards and 5 Lewis cards, and whatever. So in Chrome right now, the list is Max Verstappen, turn up the lights, and assume like for Chrome, they're all superfractors, right? So if it's on here, it's a superfractor. So Max Verstappen, turn up the lights, Oscar Piastri Futuro, the Oscar Piastri portrait, Lewis Hamilton, turn up the lights. So this next one actually already just got hit. So the Leclerc Superfractor Auto got hit. So I've put up my first vote because now every time any one of these cards gets hit, whether it's with me or somewhere else, we've got to update the list, right? So because I want to always have 10 cards on each list here. This isn't going to be a thing where they get hit and it's like, oh, okay, then now there's only 9 cards. So I put up for vote, and the community can all vote, and it's going to be up for 24 hours. And I posted it, 2 o'clock or so on Wednesday. So if you're listening to this now, go vote on my Instagram.
You have
But
about
so
4 hours.
yeah, yeah, right. The replacement is for the Leclerc Superfractor Auto. I put for the options is Leclerc Superfractor Portrait. I put the Danny Rick F1 Armor Superfractor and Pierre Gasly F1 Armor Superfractor. So those are going to be the three options to replace that one. But then the next five that are on the list are the Fernando Alonso F1 Armor, Lando Norris Turn Up the Lights, Carlos Sainz Auto, Sergio Perez Auto, and George Russell Auto. And again, all Superfractors. So those are the 10 cards in Chrome.
And I'll
And
just say that I've also seen a couple of these Superfractor F1 armors in person.
mhm.
You're gonna want one.
Oh, they're
It's
beautiful.
absolutely stunning. And again, this card design, both Scott and I are huge, collectors of the 1/2 scale helmet. So obviously we're not just sticking with Chrome, we're also with Sapphire.
Had to add in Sapphire because people are loving Chrome, but people are really loving Sapphire. So definitely had to add in Sapphire. And there's some really cool cards to be hit in Sapphire. I could have done this like the easy way and made it all just the selection stuff, but I wanted to switch it up a little bit. So we've got the Max Verstappen, so Sapphire selections, Superfractor Auto, Lewis Hamilton Sapphire selections, Superfractor Auto. Charles Leclerc, Superfractor, Sapphire Selections Auto. Sergio Perez, Sapphire Selections, Superfractor Auto. But then, wait, it's not just that. Carlos Sainz, Portrait, Pad Paraja. Then we go back to Lando Norris, Sapphire Selection, Superfractor. George Russell, Image Variation, Pad Paraja. The Ayrton Senna, Image Variation, Pad Paraja. Yeah, that's a nice one. Michael Schumacher, Image Variation, Pad Paraja, and Oscar Piastri, number 41, Pad Paraja. And that's the card with him with his helmet and the neck shoulder brace that everyone loves. So we put that one on there as well because the portrait and his freshness have already been hit. So that's his biggest card that's out there. So yeah, those are the 10 for Sapphire. As of the recording right now, none of those have been hit, so we haven't had to replace any of those yet. But basically, the theme of this is if you hit any of these 20 cards, really, 10 in Chrome or 10 in Sapphire, in the F1 Castle, and it doesn't matter if you do it with me on Fanatics Live or you do it with me on Instagram, but if you hit any of these cards on a break spot with me, you will get $1,000 in break credit. So you'll be able to throw it back down on something else or spread it out however you want to do it. But yeah, it's just a cool way to kind of keep the hype of 2023 going and add in some nice giveaways. I mean, on my 20 caser, right? We talked about it last episode. I gave away $2,500 in break credit for hitting a bunch of 101. So now we've kind of curated a list here for folks. And yeah, it's going to be awesome to start chasing some of these cards and hopefully hit some of them. And not only will it be epic for the person that gets it because they'll get the card, and that'll be super awesome. But then they'll also get $1,000 in break credit. They can choose to use however they want.
And chase another card on the F1 tip.
Hey, imagine if you ran it back with something else, and like the next break you hit another one. That'd be crazy. I might even add in like some extra money if that happened because that would just be unbelievable.
Yeah, hopefully, well, I mean, obviously you're throwing this down and it's obviously, I think one cool thing about the, I feel like a lot of card collectors are on Instagram and especially the Formula One card hobby is more on Instagram. There's a couple Discords and stuff, but I feel like the majority of it happens on Instagram. It's just more
Yep.
attuned to like sharing, big hits. I will say there's quite a few accounts out there that doesn't matter who the breaker is or whatever, they're always sharing a lot of the big hits. Like MVT cards, I think that's one I always think of. I always
Yep.
see them sharing. It's just really cool. I mean, we're all doing
Yeah.
this because we love it.
Absolutely. No, it's awesome to see anyone get big hit. And if any of these do get hit by someone else, I'll make sure to shout out, who pulled it for who and be like, "Hey, so now we've got to take it off the list." Even if I don't hit it, right? If I don't hit it, like I'm not going to pay out break credit if you hit it somewhere else, but we are going to take it off the list and I'll be like, "Hey, this card just got hit somewhere else by somebody else." And I'll give a shout out to whoever who does hit it. And that'll be awesome because any of these cards are mega cards to hit. So it'll be super cool.
And the more I've seen 2023, I I think I still personally think it's probably second to 2020. Some of these cards, like the Sapphire selections, if you haven't been lucky enough to see one of them in person, just with the borderless, they're even just the base. I know a lot of people when they're doing the breaks, they kind of get like, oh, it's just a base. Well, shout
Yeah,
out to Lando Cardrosian on Instagram. Like, there's only like 76 of them, even though it's not numbered. There's actually less Sapphire Selection base cards than there are image variations
it's true.
of the portraits that are there, the image variations of the 10 drivers that are there. So I don't know. It's awesome. Like, I shout out to the F1 Castle for doing this. You didn't have to do it, and I really just think this is going to be a really cool thing for the community to kind of rally around. So I'd love to see
Definitely.
this really catch on.
Yeah, I mean, hey, hopefully we start hitting some of them, and I start paying out break credit because I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's about, right? Is it's something that's really cool and the hype and everything, but if none of the cards get hit, then what are we doing here? So hopefully we start hitting some of the cards, and then we get to start paying out some of the break credit, choosing the new cards and everything, and that's another thing that I love about it. That even if I don't hit something, if someone else hits it somewhere wherever it is with a breaker and a Percy box or whatever, is that it becomes a community thing on voting for the next card. And listen, it's not just going to be like Max and Oscar and Lewis, right? I mean, I've got Danny Rick and Pierre Gasly as options in this next one. I mean, if some of the other F1 armors don't get hit, like Nico Hulkenberg or K Mag or Stroll, I mean, we could see Lance Stroll on the F110. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. But yeah, no, it's I'm excited for it for sure, and I hope other people's are as well.
Very, very cool. So if you took the over in the podcast time length today, you would have won because we joked ahead of time. You're like, it's probably gonna be about 45-minute episode. I was like, maybe we get to 30. We're now
No
approaching
shot.
52 minutes, but
Yep.
we probably won't do a second episode this week. It's a little bit easier to do multiple episodes per week when there's a race. Obviously, there's not a race this weekend, but obviously the Formula One car hobby does not sleep. There's a lot
Never.
of enthusiasts out there, as you've said before, not maniacs, as I use the
The hobby never
wrong term.
sleeps, Brian.
The hobby never sleeps. But unfortunately, it is getting late here on the East Coast, and I am going to actually go to sleep soon. So I think we do have to begin wrapping this show up, my friend.
That's right. Well, we'll be back next week. Next week, honestly, it'll probably be another one episode week. It'll be just the preparation for the Chinese Grand Prix, and we'll talk about whatever has gone on here in the F1 Castle. Also, just a quick shout out, guys. I've got some 1-1 cases of each Chrome and Sapphire breaks. Got one post on Instagram, one on Fanatics Live that's gonna be run on Friday, and then I'm probably gonna run another single stream. Single stream was really cool last week. So we're going to run another single stream this Sunday. This time, I'm going to try to be consistent. I know it was Saturday last time, but I'm going to try to be consistent with it being on Sunday. It'll be like Sunday singles. And I've got a lot of cards to be putting up. So we probably won't do 250 again. I think that
That was
was
that was
that was a
ambitious.
lot. It was, but hey, it was great and it worked out. Like again, I think like it was consignment, and the person I consigned them for was extremely happy with what they got, and I think people got some good deals too. So I think it was a win-win-win. But yeah, so it'll be like a Sunday singles thing. I'll probably keep it to like 100 cards maximum on a single stream. I think that's a good number. But yeah, so look out for that stuff. And then shall I take us away here?
You shall.
All right, guys. Well, remember, collect your cardboard and keep it carbon.